Whoa! Welcome on into this week's episode of Digging Deeper. Just had to throw a whoa in there like Jesus did 7 times.
Drop the whoa.
I'm Matt Cordy, joined here today by a guy with not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 4 junk drawers. It's Pastor Gabe Kasper.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for bragging about my junk drawers. We also have a junk closet.
I was going to say, that's probably my claim to fame. We had a junk closet, and a lot of it got transferred over or thrown out in our move to our house, but
smart.
There's already some accumulation.
It'll find its way back.
Yeah. It just happens.
No doubt.
And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing in a house either. Like,
I don't hate it.
Yeah, I think there's some necessity to it.
I agree.
But just, you need to empty it out sometimes, just like we talked about.
Clear it out. Yeah,
absolutely. Baby. Yeah, and so I've really enjoyed diving into the book, going in with community groups, hearing your sermon as well. But I think especially I liked your sermon because reading through that first chapter is very introductory.
Yeah.
But it's sort of hard to think of like examples of like, okay, what's this junk that I have? I know he's going to dive into it in these later chapters, but I think you did a really good job of laying out like, here's some of the biggest ones just from what Google says, or here's some examples from my personal life that, I don't know, that really resonated with me. So I think that was a little helpful. It's like, okay, like I know this is going to start picking up and there's like bigger specific examples.
Yeah.
But it's good to hear some of those like even smaller ones. It's like, oh, okay, like this is something that is cluttering up my spirituality.
Yeah, totally. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it was interesting to, preach on a biblical text, but then also use Matt Popovitz's book and like his opening chapter where it's like, obviously intros are notoriously introductory. It's in the name, and so you're just not going to get the depth that we'll experience through the rest of the book. And so I was hoping to be like, all right, how can we get people to care? Like why should this matter? So glad to hear that landed at some level. So yeah.
And I also think we don't have to talk about it a ton, but I think something that is sort of like a feature of a lot of your sermons is having a lot of different quotes and things that you pull in from either outside sources or different areas. But this, I don't even know if you had a quote from Popovitz even in this sermon.
I did not.
Which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know if there was any method behind the madness there or reason you went the way you did.
Yeah, so there was. One, you'll see in the unused notes in a little bit here that I had a pretty large quote that I had flirted with using, typed it out, and was maybe going to use it from the book.
Right.
Opted not to. And so the logic for me there, I was trying a couple things. One is I actually went to a session at the conference you and I went to a couple weeks ago. That was led by Matt Popovitz on communication. And he really encourages simplicity in communication. And simplicity doesn't mean like dumb it down or anything like that, but just be clear and straightforward and keep it like simple. Like he talked about this concept of cognitive weight. And so if I have to like burn a lot of calories trying to figure out what you're actually saying, like people just aren't. Like we just default as human beings. It's why, I don't know, we like TV more than reading for the most part. You know what I mean? Like it's just less cognitive weight for us.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to work on that balance of saying like, we of course intentionally speak at ULC towards a bit more academic audience. That's my default. That's Pastor Marcus's default. And I think a lot of Ann Arbor's default. However, that doesn't mean we have to like, I don't know, always speak that way, that we can speak a bit more grounded, a bit more simplistic in ways that are hopefully just accessible more broadly, and that actually there's wisdom in that and a type of resonance that we can strike without appealing to some sort of authoritative source outside of the guy who's talking up front. So I thought I'd give it a go. I feel pretty good about it. So, it's all right. I'm not saying I'm doing it forever, but
No, I think it fit with, especially just this sermon, just a lot of things to get through. And I think those examples like really pulled a lot of weight there. So,
Good.
Yeah. So as we start to look at some of these unused notes, you have a goal for your sermon written out here, which I know because I see your manuscript every week that you usually have a goal written out and at top of your sermon, you write that out there, but usually it's not explicitly making it into your sermon.
Right.
This week, from what I could tell in your unused notes, you almost put it into your sermon, just verbatim and put it in there, but eventually went against it. Is there a reason you did that?
Yeah.
Or what were you thinking there?
So I do. That is, and for the record, anyone communicating, like that's the trick, man. Have one goal. Like always have one goal. And people are like, well, you have 3 points. I'm like, yeah, but they all build. It's an equation. They add towards the one goal. And so that's what I always aim for when I write. I have the goal at the top. When I run into a hard spot, I'm like, what should I do? I go back and I say, like, does this serve the goal or doesn't it serve the goal? Right. So that's just kind of part of the craft of sermon writing. But this week, again, actually, from what I learned from Matt Popovits in this breakout, it was like, he's like, it can be pretty helpful to just state like, this is what I'm trying to do, and just be like really clear on like, this is where we're headed today. And so I have done that actually in the past. And I thought, maybe I'll do that on this one. But it just, frankly, didn't line up with kind of the vibe I was going for on the front end, that it just would have felt too kind of out of place. So I didn't do that, but
and I do think you got that message across. To read it for everyone.
Yeah, please.
The goal was, by the end of this sermon, I want you to feel free to open up your spiritual junk drawer so that you might find rest in the supremacy of God's grace.
That's it. Yeah. So if you listen to the sermon and then you just heard that goal, you can let me know whether or not I hit it. But that's the idea, is that everyone leaving is saying, I feel free to open up the spiritual junk drawer in order to find rest in the supremacy of God's grace.
I would say you hit it, but
thanks, man.
I'm also paid to say that. So.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
all right.
Moving
on.
All right.
All right. You talked about the excerpt from Popovits that you almost put in, and this was talking about his metaphor of the junk drawer. And then you have some of your own commentary that you almost tagged on with that, if you want to talk about that now.
Yeah, for sure. So Popovits writes, I'll read the quote. He said, I found the junk drawer to be a fitting metaphor for most people's religious and spiritual world. It seems especially appropriate for those of us who've grown up in the West, where Judeo-Christian foundations and influences have given way to a culture that is increasingly pluralistic and agnostic. We know of more gods than ever before and believe in them less than we ever have. That's a nice sentence. As a result of this, I contend, is that each of us is the owner of a seemingly random collection of theologies, doctrines, and downright superstitions. It's a junk drawer of religious ideas and influences passed down to us by parents and taught to us by the television shows we stream and the social media influencers we admire. It's a mishmash of quips, phrases, and seemingly wise sayings that have somehow stuck with us. And so then I follow up with the question is, what's in your spiritual junk drawer? What are those things, ideas, influences you picked up along the way that seem necessary, but may in fact be crowding out your ability to rest in the goodness of God? So, and I just think, obviously, this is Matt's work. He spent a lot of time honing this. And so I think he summarizes how the spiritual junk drawer works, why this is the image for him, the idea there really well in these 2 paragraphs. And so I thought, man, that's going to be a nice, maybe succinct way to get at stuff. But then again, I have a question. Because true story, I don't listen to Digging Deeper. I know, terrible. But when Marcus does his, or Randy, do they go as much into like craft conversation, or they do more the talk about extra theological bonus points?
I would say less than you do. They have, but I think it will be less than you.
Sorry.
But, no, I like that though.
Is it all right? Thanks, man. All right.
It's fine.
All right. Back to me being insufferable. So for me, I thought, okay, this is a nice way to get at it succinctly. But in terms of crafting the sermon, I was like, really, I think we need to explore it more. Because what I would have done essentially is done this quote. And to be honest, that's the cheater part with quotes, is you can say a lot because someone who's really smart said it in a really concise way, right? Yeah. And so then you don't have to take as long to make a point. You can do this so you can get more stuff in. But I was like, I think this image is so important that for as good as Matt's condensed version of it is, really my entire first point, which was the majority of my sermon, needs to just be, what is a spiritual junk drawer? And so that's where I was like, you know what? I don't need to condense it. Let's just go into it. And then a couple other comments I had that I didn't end up using was a lot of what I try to do when I write, and I think I've talked about this on here before, but is I have a person in my head, and it is the person when I start a sermon doesn't care what I have to say, doesn't think it matters, and doesn't think I'm interesting. And so I take my first 5 minutes and say, how can I change that person's mind and then keep them engaged the rest of the sermon, right? And so when it comes to something like the spiritual junk drawer, I'm just there's going to be some dude, let's be honest, it's usually a dude, who's going to be dude, why do I care about this? This is not relevant to me, right? And so I try to fend that off after I use this quote was my original plan. And so, I originally wrote, I imagine somebody may be hey, I've been in church my whole life. or I've watched a couple of YouTube videos. I don't have a spiritual junk drawer. I've got it all down. Or some people may say like, dude, I don't know. I don't care. There are bigger problems in the world. There's bigger problems in my life. Like I got to work on Monday. You talked to me about a spiritual junk drawer. Like I'm trying to raise my kids. Like I'm trying to pass college. Like this feels like a thing that feels like, dude, is this like helpful to me at all? And so I tried to head off that sort of critique. Now in the actual sermon, I just did that by just doing it without raising the questions.
Right.
In this, I tried to raise the question and then answer it right away. And my main answer to that originally was going to be like, dude, can you enter into this with a growth mindset? That if you're a Christian, a mark of spiritual maturity is a growth mindset. Like that's just a fact. Like if I encounter someone, and this happens, just viewer beware, like who's been in church for a long time, sometimes older Christians will be like, yeah, like I don't really have junk drawer. I kind of got it figured out. Like that to me is automatically, I'm like, oh man, you super don't. Like you super don't. And so it is a mark of spiritual maturity, because ultimately spiritual maturity is rooted in humility, and humility results in a growth mindset. And so to say like, hey, can I trust that this is actually going to be good for me? Can I trust that actually digging into some of the stuff that maybe what I assume I know, what I assume I have locked in, I probably shouldn't assume, and to check my assumptions.
Yeah, no, that's super fascinating. And it's easy just to think we have it all figured out and not want to challenge ourselves. But
right.
I think it's a good thing that we're doing here. So
Well, good.
Yeah. One of the things that you actually didn't have in your unused notes, but I wanted to talk about just from the book, was where Matt wrote that spirituality has become more of a private matter in today's age. He even cited a Barna study from 2022 that said that 56% of Christians feel their spiritual life is entirely private. I don't know if you want to dig into that at all and just why that might be and what might come from that just as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's put it this way. We when we think of it, like let's think about it at an academic level. Like, so this idea of the privatization of belief is a result of sort of the rise of secularism. And, you know, secularism and the word secular can mean all sorts of different things. I mean it in its sort of like as a historically contingent thought and political movement that really comes to fruition, frankly, in the French Revolution, where you kind of, and in many ways, actually the American Revolution as well, with the separation of church and state. But then in particular, the French Revolution really emphasizes like, dude, keep your spiritual beliefs to yourself. Do not bring them into the public square. Right. This is going to be ruled by reason and rationality. We don't have any space for your superstitions, right? And so that has led to a default setting that many of us in the modern West live in, of a public-private split in our lives, right? And that faith and spirituality become these entirely private matters. Now, to be clear, sorry, I'm like soapboxing, but I don't care. To be clear, there wasn't like no reason for that. Like you look at the 17th century and certainly the 16th century post-Reformation, like Christians are killing each other all over the West because like you're Catholic and I'm Lutheran, like not good. And it's because it was all tied to the state. It wasn't just like you believe in transubstantiation, die. Like it was tied to the way the church was tied to the state. So all this stuff got enmeshed. And so there was a reason to say like, can we stop killing each other and like believe your stuff, just don't bring it to the public square, right? Sure. So that's become this sort of default, what Charles Taylor, the philosopher, calls social imaginary, like our way of conceiving the world. And so it's no surprise that 56% of people would say like, yeah, it's a private thing. In public, I do something else. Now, obviously there's problems with that though. In that like, and it's a somewhat naive way of things. Like no one's like purely rational, not bringing their beliefs and their biases into the public square. Everyone does that. So we're all kind of pretending we don't, when in fact we do. And so there's a way in which we definitely, I think, would want to challenge that and say, how do we faithfully engage our faith in public? How do we faithfully live out our faith in the public square? Because it isn't the same thing as like saying we just have to then make America Christian or Lutheran or something. Like that's not the argument here, but it is saying like it absolutely should inform my engagement in the public world and is not an entirely private matter. It's because your belief as a Christian and any religious belief is what you believe about the nature of reality, which should shape how you engage the public world. where reality happens. And so, but what's happened as a kind of a result of the Enlightenment, French Revolution, is this distinction. So I think that's why that's there, and that will continue to be a thing in our slice of the world.
Yeah. So in the sermon, you talked about the 3 different values that Jesus upholds. It was faithfulness, justice, and mercy. Now, there's certainly some crossover between those, and I was just wondering, what does that Venn diagram look like, Gabe?
Yeah, man. So I secretly didn't go into this. 1, I super didn't have time. 2, it is such a big topic. I actually think maybe we'll do it post Easter. I'm not sure. I want to do a whole sermon series on that verse, and the intersection of those 3 of faithfulness, justice, and mercy. Because I think oftentimes in the Christian world right now, we're seeing people really hone in on one of those. And sometimes there's a generational line for this. It's a bit overly broad to say that, but you can kind of see that where you look at, say, like older boomers who saw what happened in the 60s and early 70s with sort of the social movements, particularly around sexuality, and are like, hey man, like we got to hold fast to the truth. We got to hold fast to what God said. We can't, and so they're very about, hey, faithfulness. And then I look at like my own generation, millennials, and probably some Gen Xers as well, where like a big emphasis was like, yeah, okay, but like mercy, like what about the poor? Like I read my Shane Claiborne and my Rob Bell, and like I'm going to care for those in need and care for the poor. And then Gen Z, younger millennials are like, yeah, it's really cool that you're nice, but like there's systemic issues here. Justice is a problem that we need to, right? Again, that's like super broad. There's people that are okay. But there's a way in which there's kind of an interesting split that way. And you just see that in Christendom where people be really obsessed with justice to the neglect of faithfulness and mercy, really obsessed with mercy. And then there's a way in which you can run into a person who really cares about being justice-minded and faithful, but they're really not merciful and forgiving and gracious towards people who aren't like them. Yeah. Right. And someone who's really justice and mercy, and really they don't care about faithfulness, since you're just kind of a secular humanist. And someone who's really merciful and faithful, but then it's like, you're not really engaging the deep issues within our world. Right. So you can see how like it's cool. Right. Yeah. And actually I should give credit, like these words were mine, but the idea for this is from John Tyson, who's a preacher I like out in New York. And then he says, though, kingdom culture is when those 3 things intersect. And that centerpiece of the Venn diagram is when you have justice, mercy, and faithfulness coming together. Yeah. And I'm like, man, that's a super helpful image.
Yeah. So, I think that even just mapping it on to some of the examples you gave during your sermon, talking about the one meeting you had where the one guy was talking about justice and maybe mercy, but maybe not the faithfulness. Or
correct.
Maybe your way when you were talking to your friend at college, where you probably lacked a little bit of mercy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so exactly. I can see sort of how you got there a little bit in your sermon, but like it's just such a, I don't know, wide scoping.
It's a rich
conversation.
Concept.
That there could be. I mean, we could do a lot more on that, but I think that's super fascinating. And I think it'd be fun to just sort of look through that even more.
It's just a helpful diagnostic, I think, even for myself to say like, because if I'm honest, I'd say I'm going to err on the mercy and faithfulness side. Like that's where I default. And I get nervous with justice conversations. And it's like, well, grow up, Gabe, put on your big boy pants. You got to lean into that stuff too. Right. Yeah. So,
That's fascinating. I'd probably say that's where I would be too, but I don't know. I think at times it's almost like I don't know.
You're a little more justicey than me, though. I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean,
it's perhaps. I mean, and I think it just changes over time as well, too. I mean, we're not a monolith either. So
true.
Yeah. I know another thing you wanted to talk about was from Jesus's final woe, was where he talked about the whitewashed tombs. And I know there's some more context you wanted to give for that.
Yeah. I really wanted to get into it, but only so much time. And just clarity, it's the 6th of 7th woe. It was the final woe in my sermon, but there is one more after.
Excuse me. Okay. I should have dug deeper there. My bad.
It's okay. It's okay. So Jesus calls the Pharisees whitewashed tombs. Now, like why does he call them that? Like that's a weird term. What is a whitewashed tomb? And I touched on it really quickly in the sermon, but this was a legit thing that the Pharisees would do. Is essentially in the Old Testament, if you touch a corpse, a dead person, a grave, anything related to someone who is dead, if you physically contact them, you are ritually unclean.
Okay.
So the issue is you have, so like, this is the interesting thing. The issue is you have folks who are making pilgrimage from wherever they live in Israel to Jerusalem. And so you're going with this throng of pilgrims and you're going to celebrate Passover. And while you're on the path, you got kids, and some little kid randomly runs and accidentally steps on a tomb or touches a tomb. Like they just, and they don't see it. They're just running. They're just kids. Yeah. Well, now that kid's ritually unclean, can't go in the temple for 7 days. And so your family that's traveled maybe 100 miles can't celebrate. And you got to so
it's a long trip home for him.
It's a long trip home. I mean, he's in a lot of trouble, right? Get in the back of the Suburban, no iPad, right? And so honestly, out of kindness, they're saying, hey, let's make it really apparent where the tombs are so no one accidentally touches them. And so they'd paint them white. They would whitewash them so that people would be prevented from becoming ritually unclean. So it's an interesting concept that and again, Jesus is not critiquing that practice. He probably affirms that. I don't know. But saying hey, you do this thing and that's all well and good. Problem is you're also like that on the inside. Right. So I just think it was an interesting cultural thing.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful image there too.
Yeah.
And something that I wanted to bring in was actually from my personal life. I'd say my second favorite band of all time.
Okay.
Is August Burns Red.
Is it Behind Wolves at the Gate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah.
But I would say that, I don't know, they have one of their more famous songs is titled Whitewashed. So immediately my head went to that, and I was just thinking through the lyrics. I even looked them up and did a little bit of research on where some of their lyrics came from, and it's sort of adjacent to what we're talking about here with just the Pharisees and hypocrisy, things like that. And the story goes that Brent Rambler, their rhythm guitarist, he was talking how they were actually kicked out of a show back when they were more labeled as a Christian metalcore band. And they were kicked out because on their rider, where you say what you want for your green room or whatever, they had alcohol. And as a Christian band, wherever they were in Pennsylvania, Virginia, wherever they were, was like, nope, we're done with you. You're out, not in the concert anymore. Wow. So he took pretty big offense to that. And then even later, some youth pastor cornered him in a parking lot and had his whole youth group gather around him and was just accosting him, saying you're a bad Christian for drinking alcohol and all this stuff. So sadly, several of the band members, not from this situation, but over time have not continued in their Christian ways.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I would think 2 out of the 5 are still Christians.
Jake Lures is still, right?
Jake and Matt. Yeah.
Okay.
But the other 3, I would say, probably aren't as devout or would even call themselves Christian anymore. And it's sad because it's sometimes from things like this. But back in this time, Brent wrote this song and he talked, actually, I'll just read through some of the lyrics here. He said, pushing your controlling values aside and dissect to your own life. It's not about my beliefs. It's a personal choice. It breaks your heart to see me consume. The alcohol he was talking about, but it shatters mine to see people follow you. You ask me to be blameless, but who are you to decide what's right? So obviously, I don't know if I believe in all maybe the theological statements he's making there, but I do think the fact where he says it shatters my heart to see people follow you in the way that you're just judging people like that. So I don't know. I could definitely see, in a way, it's almost like you could see sort of a group of Pharisees coming around, cornering Jesus and being like, why are you doing this? This isn't to the letter of the law. Yeah. And just sort of how that legalistic approach can be very harmful. So
when it's interesting, part of those lines is Jesus in one of the earlier woes says to the Pharisees, you travel across the earth to make one convert and you make them twice the son of hell that you are. Right. And it's he has this critique of the fact of they make their followers worse than them. Right. And that it's heartbreaking that he sees that. So, that is interesting. And again, I'm well, personal choice is not the argument I'd make on this, but it's it's a lyric, just chill out, nerd. Right. So, dude, that's nuts. I actually didn't know that backstory to the song.
Yeah, I didn't
know the
song.
Looked it up,
but I don't know. One of my favorite intros that they have. If I was a professional baseball player, probably my walk up.
You throw it on. You put it on Whitewashed.
Yeah, my favorite drummer, just banging it out on the drums there at the beginning. So
he is one of the best drummers in the world.
I think he's the best.
You think he's best? Well,
that's a whole nother podcast.
We'll get into that.
But I just thought that was interesting and how that. I assumed that there was probably some tie in there, but I'm assuming that that's where he got the inspiration, at least for the name and things like that too. Yeah. So
and it is interesting too because they're not, like Jake Lure's their vocalist. and in many ways, they as a band, especially at this time, we're very much on the front line, probably catching a lot of grief, right? Like the metal world doesn't love Christian metalcore, no matter how good it is. And ABR is notoriously a very, very good band. And so they're getting a lot of grief from one side, and then to have their own people be like, "You had a beer," is like, come on. But Jake started an organization called Heart Support, right? That cares for kids in mental health crisis and that sort of thing. And like, man, they're out there doing the thing.
Yeah.
And then some random youth pastor corners you and says like, "You drank a beer, how dare you?" And it's like sort of the epitome of whitewashed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one other thing I wanted to bring up was actually my favorite section from this chapter that Matt wrote, and I was going to read it and see some of your thoughts on it as well too, but it was something I wanted to highlight. So he writes here that the problem with rejecting one religious system in favor of your own is that you still end up with a religious system. You'll think you're assembling something better, but in fact you're not. The irony, as we discover, is that apart from the message of Christ crucified and resurrected for sinners, we end up building the very thing we claim to abhor, a system laden with expectations and burdens, blind spots, and bigotries. We build something that robs us of joy and drives us further from the peace and hope we're so desperate to find. He then later goes on to say that in Jesus we bring nothing and receive everything. And I just love the simplicity of the gospel boiled down there into 4 words, like bring nothing, receive everything.
Receive everything.
And I also like just how he's talking about the construct of religion as well, where when we're trying to turn away maybe from Christianity, a lot of times we're creating a different type of religion where it actually is more burdensome than Christianity is, where you are free.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And that is a major hobby horse of mine. In fact, I'm working on a book kind of about almost exactly this topic, that I think the belief of some sort of religious neutrality, that it's like, hey, I'm not a Christian anymore, I'm just not religious. Like, and there's a lot of people that would say that. Well, that's not actually technically true. I get what they're saying, but like, you're not part of a formal religion, but human beings are inherently religious creatures, and like you will create a religion of your own, and it will be more oppressive than the gospel. Like that's default, because your religion is either the gospel of grace that says bring nothing, receive everything, or it's a gospel of law, which is no gospel at all, that says like you have to perform in some way, whether that's in the political sphere, you got to buy into our beliefs, our brand of things, do it, get in line, learn the vocabulary, let's go, or it's your own personal success, your own personal happiness, or whatever. Like that ends up being a burdensome law that you place on yourself,
and you're still never going to fulfill it.
And you never fulfill it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say anything outside the gospel of grace is an oppressive religious system. Yeah. And then the struggle for us as Christians is we can so often turn the gospel of grace into an oppressive religious system. Right. And so that's the thing. So that's maybe what I'd say to good friends who are Christians, is to say, the point in examining our spiritual junk drawers is to say, like, have I lost sight of the gospel of grace and turned this into an oppressive religious system in my own life and or in the lives of others? And then for those of you maybe who aren't Christians but are listening to this, glad to have you. Dude, are you living within an oppressive religious system and have yet to receive the freedom that Christ offers us in the gospel?
Yeah, it's really freeing. And I just loved how he wrote that out there. So
good. Yeah, it's really, really good.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this segment of Digging Deeper. Amy and Nate will be on the other side talking about broken vessels. But coming up next week will be Pastor Gabriel once again.
Back at it again with the white bands.
That's right. And we're going to be going through chapter 2, which is the myth of the cosmic scale. You'll be talking about that scale in your sermon on Sunday, and going through Psalm 103, at least the first part of that, verses 1 through 13.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to it. Starting to work on it today after this, so I have no idea what I'm going to say, but looking forward to doing it.
I'm sure it'll be great.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. What a friend.
Also paid to say that.
So true.
All right. Well, thanks again for watching this segment. Make sure to stay around for Amy and Nate.
Ciao. Ciao.
Hello. So we are back again. I'm so excited about this new series, Junk Drawer Jesus. It's very hard for me to say. And just one of the things that Pastor Gabe and I talked about was this idea of the things that are in our junk drawer that kind of mask who Jesus is. And so my focus this week, as we were picking music, was really on how can we really see Jesus for who he really is? And I loved what he talked about with the kind of the sayings that we all think are in the Bible, but are not really there. Like, God will never give you more than you can handle. And
Yeah, there was I was thinking he was going to quote one of them, and one of the sayings I was thinking of was cleanliness is close to godliness, which is something people say a lot, and the scripture was actually Jesus directly, like the Pharisees were clean on the outside,
right,
and they were dirty on the inside. So it's like some of these sayings are about godliness and the opposite of what
the Bible says.
Yeah. And Jesus hanging out with poor, dirty people.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's a good time to reflect on just like what we've all heard these things, and you kind of just assume them. We just haven't thought about them.
You just don't think about them until you actually see what the scripture is and what Jesus was really saying. And, I love that. I thought it was really, really clear. And so the song that we chose to do today is called Broken Vessels. And it's kind of an older song. But it really talks about how, we were blind, but now, we can see, and, I can see you now. I can see the love in your eyes, and then how he laid himself down for us, raising us broken people up to life. Yeah.
Can seeing clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like Paul with the scales.
Yes. So we're going to sing it.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
All these pieces broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and whole, empty-handed but not forsaken. I've been set free, I've been set free. Amazing grace, how sweet like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. See you next week.
Thanks, Amy and Nate, for going through Broken Vessels with us, on just how that applied, and just hearing your thoughts on Junk Drawer Jesus and that introductory sermon from Pastor Gabe as well. I agree. It was definitely great to hear some of those different examples and sort of see how those do sneak into our junk drawer at times. So coming up ahead next week will be The Scale. That'll be chapter 2 from the book, The Myth and the Cosmic Scale. And Pastor Gabe will be back here in the green seat to go through that with us on Digging Deeper. And we'll be going through Psalm 103, 1 through 13. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. God bless.